Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to this remaster series I'm making in RTS in Unreal Engine 5. In today's video, we'll be working on our zoom. This video and this series have been brought to you by Patreon sponsors. You too can help support this channel by becoming a Patreon sponsor. And if that's just a bit too much, all you have to do to really help this channel is hit that like button down below. Okay, open up your project and we'll make a start. Alright, so we'll be working on our zoom. As you can see, I have my camera pawn, project settings, movement component, game mode, and controller open. I just like having my map over here. First, go to core, go to player. Now, our zoom is not going to be a real zoom. Again, for those of you who are not aware, zoom isn't about moving closer or farther from something. It's about changing the field of view so that you have a more narrow field when you're zoomed in and a less narrow field when you're zoomed out. So it's a wider field. We will not be doing that. If you want, you can take what we are doing and very easily expand out to include proper change and field of view. What we are going to do is what people mistake for zoom. We are going to change our spring arm length. And we're going to do so in a much smoother fashion than we did in the original series. So what we'll do for that is in the player folder, we're going to right click, we're going to go to miscellaneous, and then we want curve. And in curve, we're going to select a curve float. And this we'll just name curve. And in case you decide to actually expand this out, this will be zoom arm length. Let's go ahead and pop that open. You will need one for field of view, by the way. All right, so I'm going to just right click and add a key, and then right click somewhere else and add another key. So this first key, I'm going to make sure it's at 0 on the X axis, and on the Y axis, well, that's going to be a bit different. That's going to be the max spring arm length, which I'm going to set to be 1350. There we go. And I'm going to grab this other one down here, the second one, and then we need this at a value of 1. So we're all the way zoomed in, and I'm going to set this as a default of 300. Now I'm just going to zoom out to find out where the heck these things are. There we go. All I had to do is hit the fit to zoom. And then with both of these selected, I'm just going to make sure I do have both selected. We're going to go up to here and I'm going to do cubic interpolation. There we go. And we now have a much smoother curve to our zoom. And you can change this to change how your zoom works. So like if you want your zoom to go real out first for some reason, like however this line looks is how the zoom is going to operate. Let me just undo that. We're going to save it and leave it like this for now. All right, next what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our camera pawn. And in our camera pawn, we're going to create a new variable, which we will call curve zoom arm length. I'll give you a guess what type this is going to be. So we want a curve, and we're just going to take the regular curve. We will put this into a category called camera zoom. So camera zoom. There we go. Go ahead and compile. And then for this one, we are going to give, all right, so this is the wrong type of curve. Sorry about that. We don't want that curve. We want to actually scroll down a bit and find curve float. Now compile. And then we have one curve that we've created, which is our curve zoom arm length. We're just going to store that in there for now. Now, the way this is going to work is that we are going to zoom on our tick if we need to zoom. And we're going to do that from our movement component. So we're going to be very cautious about what we put on our ticks because we want to use our ticks sparingly. In fact, we're going to use our ticks twice in this section. And one of them is a constant thing with the camera moving, and the other one is for smoothness. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 4 events total. We're going to have a zoom in event, a zoom out event, a reset zoom, and a what we're going to call zoom events, which actually implements both the zoom in, zoom out, and reset. So let's start with our zoom in. So we're going to create a new function, which we'll call zoom in. And zoom in will be in a category called camera zoom. So I have not done that yet on this one, camera zoom, and it's a really simple sort of setup we have here. We are going to have a new variable called delta, and for those of you not familiar, delta just means change in, and this will be delta zoom amount. So the change in our zoom amount will be of type float, and we are going to set this first. Actually, let me put this in the correct folder. We want this to be private, by the way. We are going to set this in our folder of camera zoom, and we are just going to pin it there. And we are going to add to it whatever value you want. I'm going to choose a value of 0.1, and we are going to add it to whatever the current delta zoom amount is. Now let's just quickly compile this, and I want to set the default amount to 0.5. All right, there we go. So that way we know where we're at. And then next what we're going to do is, yeah, we could clamp this, but I don't want to. I want to do a branch. So what we're going to do is we're going to check, is this greater than a value of 1? If it is greater than a value of 1, what we are going to do is we are going to set our delta zoom amount to 1. So I'm just going to paste that over there, set that to a value of 1, and then do a return node. Now I'm doing a return node even though this is a virtual function, just with no actual return, just so we get in the practice of doing this next bit. Take the false and plug that into the reroute. Because down the road, there'll be times where we'd want to continue past whatever we do right after the branch when it's false. So just get used to doing that. Right. So this value is what we're going to pass into our tick that will change where we're at on the x-axis. So how zoomed in we are. So when we're zoomed out, we'll be at our spring arm length of 1350. When we're halfway in, it'll be halfway between 1350 and 300. All right, now we're going to do our zoom out event. So that's zoom in, zoom out. We're just going to duplicate this, and we'll call this zoom out. And all we're going to do here is change that to a minus. We're going to subtract, and what we're going to do is change this value to whatever you plugged into the zoom in. So these values should remain the same. You could create a variable for that to make it easier. Hint, you probably should. We're going to change this to be less. So if it is less than 0, we want to set the value to 0. All right, that's our zoom out. Our reset zoom is really simple. Let's go back here. We're going to create a new function called zoom or reset zoom. And this will go into our zoom category. And we're just going to get our delta zoom amount. We're going to set it, and we're going to set it to 0.5. Again, you might want to make that into a variable too. And then we will do a return node, and that is that one done. And then finally is our zoom event. So this one is where it gets a bit more complicated because this is what we're actually doing to zoom. So we're setting our zoom, our change in our zoom when we do our zoom button presses, which will be the mouse wheel. That will then get implemented on the tick. So to do that, we're going to create a new function called zoom events. I call it events because in my personal projects, I tend to rotate the camera, change field of view, and the spring arm. So it is multiple events. Really here, it's one event. And yes, you can use the curve we've created as a template to build 2 other curves if you want to do rotation and field of view as well. What we're going to do now is create a variable for how much we're zoomed in. And we're going to call this our zoom amount. So let's just create a new variable. This will be our zoom amount. And we will compile real quick so we can get access to its default. We'll set the default to 0.5 as well. So we're halfway zoomed in, which you'll notice when we start up the game in a moment, that's going to cause the camera to move. It's going to just be a little bit different than where we had it earlier. We're going to put that in that category. We'll mark it as private. And what we're going to do is we are going to set our zoom amount by lerping between these 2 values. And we're going to lerp at a rate of 0.1. And we will have in our top, and our A value, our zoom amount. And in our B value, we will have our delta zoom amount. Okay, with that done, what we're going to next do is we're going to get the camera pawn. And now we need to pause for a moment. So let's go over to our camera pawn. And in our camera pawn, we're going to create a new function called set arm length. And this will be under our camera zoom category. And it's going to have one input, which will be in zoom amount. Now I'm putting the in at the start so I don't get confused why it says in. It's the amount we're passing into it. It's not we're zooming in versus zooming out. It's how much are we passing into this function. What's the value we're passing in? So I'm going to get my curve zoom arm here. And I'm going to get it as a getter right now, but I'm going to right click it and I'm going to convert to validated get. I want to make sure this thing actually exists, because if that's empty, then this won't work. So if it is valid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my camera boom and I'm going to set target arm length. I'm going to plug that into the is valid. And what am I going to plug into here is, well, this value here. But how do I convert that over? Well, I'm going to pull off this curve zoom arm length here, and I'm going to do get float value. And that float value goes into there, and into my from my in zoom amount goes into my in time. That's why that 0.5 matters. We're starting halfway between fully zoomed in and fully zoomed out. So it isn't really time we're looking at in this curve. That 0 to 1, so between this line here and this line here, is the proportion that we are zoomed in. That's all. So what we're doing here is setting that proportion. And that's literally all we're doing. And again, let's do a return node. And to get into the habit of making sure that we bypass anything that we need to bypass, if it's not valid, we're still going to do a return. We're just not going to set the target arm length. We're just going to go around it. I want you to get used to doing that, because you might run into issues when we do our game time where if you forget to do the bypass on the false, it doesn't update time. All right, so there we go. Let's go back to our BP movement component. And in our movement component, what we're going to do is we are going to set arm length, and we're going to set it to be our zoom amount. So it is our zoom amount being sent in. There we go. And then, of course, at the end of this, we should have a return. Right. I said events because I'm so used to having 2 more nodes right after this, where it's the FOV and the rotation. If you want to, all you gotta do is make your own curves for it. Go back to your event graph, and then in your event graph, we're gonna plug our zoom in events to that. There we go. And then we will move this to our zoom folder there. And technically, this should be private. The other one should be public, because we're using that one to actually run the things. It's the zoom in, zoom out, and reset zoom that we want public. Right, we need to be able to call this up. So what we're going to do is go to our project settings, and in our project settings, we are going to add in we're going to add in 3 new action mappings. We are going to add in, actually I'm going to get rid of this one for now because we don't need it. We're going to add in zoom in. We're going to add in zoom out. And then we're going to add in zoom reset. Each of these will have 2 different options. So for zoom in, we'll do mouse wheel up. For our second option, we will do page up. For our zoom out, it'll be mouse wheel down and page down. For our reset zoom, it will be middle mouse button plus control. So make sure to hit that Boolean control check there. And then for our alternative option, it will be end. Okay, with that done, go back to your player controller. And in your player controller, I'm just going to search for zoom in, zoom out, and reset zoom. Don't worry about the layout. We'll fix this all in a minute. So I am going to want some space between this event and the zoom events, because we'll have other things happening for basic movement, such as edge scroll, movement speed modifier, things like that. I'm just gonna give myself a little bit of room to play with. And I'm gonna grab the movement component again here. I don't get why Control W doesn't work anymore. We're gonna do zoom in, plug that into there. And I'm not gonna duplicate that. I'm just going to do a zoom out. And I'm going to plug that into there. Line those up. And just make sure we have a nice little thing for that. And then for the reset, I actually will duplicate the event, and this is reset zoom. Okay, plug that in. And go ahead and compile. And let's head over to our map to test it. So I'm going to hit wrong thing. I'm not sure why that moved randomly. I'm going to hit play. All right, so our camera still moves. I'm zooming out. Can't zoom out any further. I'm zooming in. I can't zoom in any further. So there is our fairly smooth zoom mechanic. All right, that takes us through. Oh, hang on. Let me zoom all the way in, and then there's my reset. All right, that takes us through everything that we need to do in this video. We've now set up our zoom. In the next video, we will set up our panning events. And if you want to be here for that video, make sure to hit the subscribe and notify icon. Also, that really does help the channel out. And if you want to take your support just a little bit further, all you have to do is hit the like button as well. And again, if you want to take it even further than that, if you have any spare change left over at the end of the month, consider becoming a Patreon sponsor. Patreon sponsors at upper tiers get instant access to all ongoing and completed projects, and at other tiers get access to projects once they're completed on YouTube. As always, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.